that might not be able to join us live. Great. So welcome, everyone. So just really quick, I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of what Lift Economy is, who we are, and then I'll pass it over to Kevin. One other piece of housekeeping is that we love you to put in your questions in the chat if you don't feel comfortable voicing them out loud. And we will have opportunities where we'll actually ask for questions and participation. But feel free to put the questions in the chat at any time. My name is Erin Axelrod, and I'm a partner at Lift Economy, and I've been a partner for about 4 years now. And Lift Economy, we are an impact consulting firm dedicated to creating, modeling, and sharing a locally self-reliant economy that works for the benefit of all life. And we do this in a number of ways. Firstly, and I'll just remind folks to mute yourself as you join. Great, thanks. Firstly, we have worked with hundreds of companies over the past 7 years. And so we work directly with social entrepreneurs and larger businesses, larger companies that are really on the cusp of transforming the way we do business, the norms and cultural values that we bring to business, and really transitioning away from the business as usual economy into something that is focusing on just transition and regenerative economics. And we also have a small fund called the Force for Good Fund that is a $1.1 million pilot fund explicitly designed to invest in women and person of color owned enterprises. So we have 13 companies in that portfolio of companies, and really, really inspired and co-learning with those companies around how we can actively put our ideals around an economy that works for all life into practice within the constraints of the extractive economy. And I think I'll stop there, and I want to pass it to my teammates to see if they have anything to add, and also to let them introduce themselves. So maybe we'll do introductions first, and I'll pass it to Shawn. You want to go and pass it to our other partners?
Hi, everybody. Shawn Berry, partner at Lift Economy. I'm very happy to see folks, especially some old friends here. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we're excited to start another round of the MBA, and glad you all showed up to find out more info. Let's see. I'm in the Hudson Valley of New York, and yeah, I think just keep it short for now. Call on Kevin.
Great, thanks, Shawn. Along with Shawn, I'm a co-founder of Lift Economy, and by way of background, I have experience in the arcane world of starting technology companies, raising venture capital, and hiring teams and doing that kind of stuff. And my background kind of took a hard pivot at one point where I wasn't really manifesting the world of my values that I wanted to express myself. And so I started learning about permaculture design, and about 10 years ago now started something called the Urban Permaculture Institute, where I've facilitated permaculture trainings for over 1,100 people over the last 10 years, 12 years actually. And I also am a senior fellow, research fellow at a think tank called Project Drawdown, which is a think tank that is assessing, measuring, mapping, and modeling solutions to global warming. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. My name is Andrew, and I am based in Oakland. And my background is largely in regenerative agriculture and food systems, and really inspired to find a company such as Lift Economy that's bridging the space between regenerative, agriculture and economy, and as Erin mentioned, kind of a just transition and social equity. So those are kind of the lenses that I bring to a lot of this work, and excited to meet you all.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, Shawn. And we do have additional partners who are not able to be on the call today. But I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about why this Next Economy MBA. How did that come about? And maybe I'll also explore kind of the arc of the call today, what kind of territory we can explore together. The MBA training came out of a few observations and circumstances. Over the last 10 years, 9-10 years, Lyft has been working with clients, so social enterprises at different phases of development, like Erin said. And that's been the bulk of our engagement. And a couple things happened over time. One, a number of individuals who were either thinking about starting a company or very early in the stages of development of a social enterprise, or even kind of wanting to have a job or a vocation that more aligns with their values, would come to us and say, how do I learn more about what Lyft does and what this Next Economy thing is? How can I work with you? And after receiving dozens or more, maybe even hundreds of those type of inquiries, we kind of came around to this idea that we need to figure out a way to do one-to-many sharing instead of working one-on-one with clients in that type of arrangement. And simultaneous with that kind of solicitation from us of how to learn more about the Next Economy and the skills, it's definitely self-evident to us that the current educational pedagogy around MBA trainings and business trainings don't serve the principles and values of this emerging Next Economy. We know this in a couple of ways because a number of our clients, the leaders and founders and entrepreneurs who run these companies, have an MBA from a variety of different MBA programs. And they would confess to us, this is not the things that we're sharing and exploring and the decision making that we're doing, the systems that we're developing with them to optimize social and environmentally beneficial impacts are not things that were discussed or learned about in their MBA program. And so it became, again, more and more obvious to us that there's this gap in the space of education on how to help play a role in creating the Next Economy. And so combining those ideas, there's one other big motivating force for Lyft Economy in our vision and mission and how we create this network, this mosaic of bioregional, locally self-reliant economies around the world. There's this need for people to be more engaged. We need, there's a number of, how should I say it? There's a number of social enterprises and multi-stakeholder cooperatives and organizations that we know the world needs, and the Lyft Economy team is too small. We're not starting enterprises. We're helping people, so we need to find a way to recruit people en masse to actually grow these enterprises because the world needs them. And so if you combine those three motivations, that's what brought us to, let's trial a training. Let's figure a way that we could have some type of prolonged engagement with people who are mostly already doing really incredible, inspiring things. And let's add value if we can to what they're already doing through some nuts and bolts skills and systems development type training, as well as let's engage other people who are wanting to move into that space, and they're already coming with their values and their heart and wanting to align their energy with the world they want to see. So what can we do? So we tried that last year for the first time, this 9-month training. And we're moving into a space this fall where we're intending to launch the second iteration of that. And so that's the MBA. So today, we do have some content to share, mainly case studies that could give us a seed to grow some discussion and highlight what a curated learning experience in the MBA might look like. Also very happy to talk about our pedagogical approach to facilitating learning experiences. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do we think about learning? And then also any logistics, nuts and bolts about, how does one sign up for the MBA training if the Next Economy MBA? When does it meet? What if I have to miss one, or any logistics questions like that? So with that, maybe Erin, could I turn it over to you to,
Yeah, one of the things that we thought would be helpful to start off with is actually having you all hear from a participant in our MBA thus far. So I do want to turn it over if Monica is still on the line and you would like to share. We're ready for you whenever you are.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. I discovered the LIFT team and their work through the Next Economy podcast, actually, a few years ago. At the time, I was living and working in Hong Kong, very much in the business as usual economy. I was working for a large manufacturer in intimate apparel. Our biggest client was H&M, so you can imagine, I was very much in the current model. And I sort of had a moment of waking up to what this work was doing and my part in it because of the following the Tazreen fire and the Rana Plaza tragedy. At the time, my company that I worked for was the largest intimate apparel manufacturer in Bangladesh. And while we didn't have any of those particular issues, thank goodness, of course, you start to question kind of the role of our business and what we're doing in the region. And since it's a private company, we still very much interacted with the owner, who was Swedish, and he kind of took this opportunity to look at what we were doing there, how we could be better, because we had gotten so much from the region and the people, and it was kind of sort of an opportunity to lead. And even though I was in marketing, I sort of put my hand up and started doing some factory projects with the workers and starting to get educated about this kind of next economy principles, but for me specifically in apparel. And it wasn't my background. I'm very traditionally trained. I have a business undergrad degree and had always worked on the marketing side, but I was trying to educate myself, and I was, through my research, found the Next Economy podcast, loved every interview. It was so high quality. I really appreciated learning from these people who are actually doing this work, and found out that there's sort of a framework and philosophy behind it for many years. So when I moved to the Bay Area, I was looking them up and found the course, the MBA course. And my goals going in were really to, one, understand the fundamentals of this work, and that there's actually a framework that people have been working on with a lot of rigor and case studies and examples for many, many years. And so that was one of my goals, and also to network and meet people who are actually doing this work, and then also meet other students who are interested in the topic, just like me, sort of finding a way to integrate this new way of thinking into my current work, or change jobs, or just kind of explore what this would mean now. Because sort of when I woke up to this, I kind of can't not see it anymore. So I felt really compelled to do something about it for myself. And the third thing was really to explore ways to hopefully one day participate in this model and be part of this wider movement. And this was very unknown to me. I still don't know really how to do it, but it was important to me to invest the time and money to understand what this is, because I also feel that the current model is broken. So now I'm currently working in digital media at Sephora, so I'm pretty much not in the next economy yet. But since doing the course, I feel like I'm looking at all my work opportunities through different lens, and sort of always kind of, I feel very prepared that once I do see an opportunity or ways to integrate this kind of thinking, or even jump ship at some point and start something, or be a part of something else, I feel very confident that it's possible, and there's steps and there's ways to do this through my coursework, and also having the LIFT team be mentors and support. And also my fellow students, we have a Bay Area like breakout group that we're very engaged and supportive, and kind of a resource to each other as we're all exploring how to integrate this new way of thinking into our own work. So that's been so valuable. And then also through Erin, I got connected with a woman named Sally Fox, who is an organic cotton breeder in the Bay Area, and she's been doing this work sort of on her own for the past 30 years growing organic cotton and exploring new ways to have introduced natural dyes. And she's been doing this work kind of on her own. And I was connected through Erin and kind of helping her now create documents of what she wants to do for the next phase of her enterprise. So it touches on my background in apparel, and she's a wonderful person, and I just now can kind of offer her my time and energy and also the things I've learned in the course to kind of help her formulate what she wants to do with her business. And so I sort of have my tentacles in a lot of things, but I just can't recommend it enough. It's been such a wonderful experience, and I feel very confident with what I've learned.
Thank you so much, Monica. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. It's a great lead-in to one of our questions that we wanted to, or one of the questions we imagine that many of you might be having is, who is this a fit for? And you touched on, Monica, a few of the different roles. We kind of conceive of kind of 4 different categories that each one of us floats in and out of in our daily lives. And these are roles that we can actually affect change in the next economy through. And so some of these may speak to you. We see a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's kind of 2 camps: those that are thinking about starting something, or potentially you've already started something and you want to grow it. There's another role that is the role of job seeker in this next economy, which many you alluded to, Monica, having working within an organization right now and looking analytically at how we can apply next economy principles within existing organizations. There's the role of the customer, which we all interface with on a daily basis. How do we align our purchasing choices more fully with next economy principles? And then, of course, there's also the investor role that sometimes gets misconstrued as only if you have $1 million or an accredited investor, net worth. But we actually like to conceive of it as a kind of sort of a larger base. Many of us are investors in the choices we make of where we put our money in banks, as well as how we invest in other ways. And so within this sort of 4 archetypes of the places that we can influence, our circle of influence, and those roles, this course really attempts to cover the gamut of how the principles apply within each of those roles, because we recognize that there's a lot of fluidity, and many of us hold different hats throughout the spheres of influence that we work in and operate within. So we do focus on life design principles as well, in terms of how to make choices that increase our capacity to step in more fully to what is being called for. Andrew or Shawn or Kevin, do you have anything to add to that? And are any questions coming up from our participants around what we've covered so far, or thoughts that you might have? Feel free to put them in any point into the chat. And what we wanted to kind of turn now towards is sharing a few case studies of companies that we look to for inspiration and as reference points for what is possible. Maybe Kevin, you could share the first one, and then we can kind of use these case studies as examples of some of the content that we try and communicate via the course. And then after we share the case studies, we also wanted to take some time to share a little bit of the pedagogy, and also plenty of time for questions and answers.
Great, thanks, Erin. Yeah, maybe I'll start by sharing a case study that we frequently reference, an organization that's actually local here to the Bay Area called Planting Justice. Planting Justice is a case study that we use frequently in that it's actually incorporated as a for-public benefit corporation, meaning a 501c3. It's actually a nonprofit. And in the next economy, you'll find that as we go into understanding the next economy, we'll describe how we are, maybe surprisingly to some, legally structurally agnostic, meaning that in the next economy, we do see worker-owned cooperatives, multi-stakeholder cooperatives, nonprofit organizations, benefit corporations, flexible purpose corporations, some family partnership, general partnerships. There's a whole gamut of legal structures. We're very inclined to be very concerned about in the next economy the operating structure, and we'll talk about the values of democratic structure of how work gets done. But the legal structure is less important to us. Planting Justice, what they do is they have this mission to empower people who are impacted by mass incarceration and other social inequities related to structural racism, structural sexism, and they provide learning experiences for skills and resource building in the context of cultivating food sovereignty, as well as community healing. And they do this through a few different ways. One thing that they do is they have programs where they actually work with post-incarcerated population to provide training in landscape stewardship services. So that there's this training program that actually started in prison, and as people matriculate out of prison, there's this catch where they have vocational pathways, job opportunities that pay above the local minimum wage and more than the wages that are common in the industry of landscape stewardship. And they pay those wages both from philanthropic money that they raise, as well as they have a very significant component of their organization is earned income. So they actually do design, build, and maintenance of landscapes. So in those landscapes that they design and build are using ecosystemic design, permaculture design, such that the landscapes are edible landscapes and productive landscapes in people's backyards, front yards, on school properties, and other commercial properties, and municipal properties. So in the areas around the Bay, in the East Bay, where Planting Justice works, you'll find that people are getting local nutrition, perishable fruits and vegetables, dense nutrition coming from the land, which is completely different than the norms of landscaping, mow and blow lawns and this addiction to law and order stuff. They also have just other programs. They've started a nursery that they've acquired to make the germplasm, the plants, the productive, climate adaptive fruits and vegetables, dense nutrition available at very reasonable cost. Plants that are rare and hard to find at other nurseries, so that more people can have access to transforming the built environment to provide for more food security. At that nursery facility, they've partnered with local indigenous tribes to create the first parcel that is owned by the Sigoriate Land Trust, which preserves the indigenous tenure of land that has, of course, been taken away through the genocide of the indigenous people and through colonialism. They also have a farm, a 5-acre farm, as part of an eco-village that is a separate entity that they've created called Wild and Radish to make a resilient community accessible, a model of a resilient community that's funded in a way so it could be accessible to everybody. So a lot of the resilient communities and housing developments that are done, especially in the Bay Area, are not at all affordable or accessible. And they're piloting a community based around a farm that's providing training that is making housing permanently affordable and accessible. And I could go on because they have stacked in a number of additional pieces into this business model as an operating entity. They, in terms of their practices of internal self-development and growth within the organization, their practices of democratic organizing, how they get funding, how they raise funding for the Eco Village. There's a lot of things that I could say about them, but they encapsulate a number of, and I would dare say not all yet, but a number of some of the principles that we cover in designing next economy organizations. Planting Justice is indicative in the way that they've embodied a number of the principles that we share and discuss as a case study. Any questions about that case study? I guess one thing I'll say is if you're thinking about the economy, if you're coming to this discussion and the potential of the MBA training, and you want to think about the big picture, like the economy, and you're saying, well, just an organization with 30, 50 employees, in the Bay Area doing landscape stewardship, how does that change the world? It's not that any one entity that we work with is the next economy. They are indicators of the next economy. And if you close your eyes for a moment and imagine the multi-billion-dollar industry of landscape stewardship or landscape maintenance in this country or around the world, and if they were all acting like Planting Justice, doing community healing, doing local food sovereignty work, all of a sudden you have the makings of a completely different world in the way humans meet our needs. So it's any one example we might share as a case study is not the economy at large, but they are indicators of the pattern.
Yeah, I just want to echo and support that observation, and share also that another aspect of the Lift Economy vision that is held by a lot of our collaborators in this sphere is the idea of how do we actually support and bolster these really grassroots or critically vitally needed immune response organizations to be able to have the capacity to document, to have the discipline to document what they're doing, and then share it out in a way that other communities around the world can replicate their model and not have to reinvent everything or create it from the ground up, but can create models that are very similar, learning from the key learnings from those entities, but distinctly place-based and adapted to a different ecosystem. And the next model that I'd like to share is addressing a related but distinct challenge that we see in our economy, which is the challenge of housing and displacement. We certainly see this happening across the country, gentrification of communities, displacement of Black and Indigenous people from communities, and one solution that we would like to spotlight that is emerging is an entity called the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. And this was actually pretty neat. One thing you'll hear us say at Lift Economy is that we often call ourselves structure agnostic, meaning that we're not that tied to nonprofits versus for-profits. We see an ecosystem, a polyculture, if you will, of different forms of operating as entities and organizations. And so this entity that I'm referring to, the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, Kevin, maybe you could put it in the chat, the link to it, is actually structured as a California cooperative organization. And their mission as the cooperative is actually to communally develop cooperative affordable real estate alternatives. Being that they are a California cooperative, there is a addendum to a law that was recently passed by an entity called the Sustainable Economies Law Center, a lengthy, wordy organization, but I encourage you to check them out. Their acronym is the SELC. That said that California cooperatives can actually receive investment from non-accredited investors of up to $1,000 without going through onerous securities laws. And so this cooperative, East Bay PREC, which is their acronym, East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, is actually looking at leveraging that law to accept investment from the community to purchase land, urban lots, and own them in the cooperative to create perpetually affordable housing. So the model is really right now in idea form, and that idea is something that, if built into the design of the model, the desire to replicate that idea and implement it first in Oakland East Bay, but then in every other community across the country that's facing gentrification and displacement of people that have long-standing tenure in communities, that we feel is an idea whose time has come in terms of really shifting the power dynamics in our communities around decision making, around things like place-based tenure, and really rooting people back into their connection to place and their connection to community, and having the wherewithal to really being that the leasing agreements for something like an East Bay permanent real estate cooperative will be something to the effect of a 99-year lease that conveys the rights of ownership. So tenants don't actually own the home. The home is owned in commons by the cooperative, but the tenants will have a right, an ownership of the lease, which they can then pass on and build. It's essentially changing up our notions of how we build equity around the housing. So I'll stop there and just see if any of the LIFT partners want to add to my characterization of that model.
Hi, this is Shawn. I would just like to add to it. I got an email this morning from one of our partners, actually a lawyer fellow that was trained through the CELC. They have a nice network around the country of lawyers that are now trained up by this group, and they're up to cool things. She shared with me they basically have their own version of this happening in Traverse City, Michigan. They have a 3-story building that they've purchased and are renovating with ground floor retail, second floor office and community space, and then third floor below market rate housing. And in their little prospectus, they reference East Bay Prec, but also 4 other projects in development around the country, in Detroit, New York, Colorado, and Minnesota. So I guess one thing to share is, like, while we're picking out a couple case studies to mention that demonstrate it, there's a massive movement going on, which is really exciting. There's some of these examples where they're, I guess we would call it more whole, right? They're building in more and more elements into their model as demonstrations of what can be accomplished in this next economy. And so we're trying to pull out some of those to show you. But the amount of small scale businesses, nonprofit organizations, community-based groups that are bringing at least one piece of the solution is massive. And so to me, it's just very, very exciting time to kind of tune in to what's happening and try to be a part of riding that wave forward.
Shawn, just to add to what you just shared, when Shawn mentions more whole, we have a series of principles that we've kind of looked at, and we reference often principles like focus on designing for meeting essential human needs. So goods and services that fulfill our food, water, shelter, community, education needs. But there's a whole list of principles: zero waste, inclusion, and equity. And we shared those in a previous webinar that we did last month. But that's also something that we share and talk about in the MBA program. And I also wanted to spotlight another principle that we hold as a value at Lift Economy, which is, and I'm not sure that we've articulated this. This is maybe a newish articulation that I was talking with a friend yesterday about, but looking at the value of lived knowledge over learned knowledge. Or there's lots of different ways to think about that, but one of the things Shawn brought up is that the SELC has catalyzed lawyers to be fully bar certified in California without having to go into debt and go to law school. And the fact that by apprenticing with SELC lawyers, they were actually acquiring their certification through the process of working on real world challenges and solving real world legislative, moving policy forward that is legalizing sustainability in communities, legalizing seed saving, addressing cooperative structure in California. So I just wanted to presence that so often I see in US mainstream culture this privileging of kind of book knowledge or academia that is reserved to an academic situation. And this attempt at the MBA and with other partners that are doing this work is an attempt to really lift up the lived knowledge, like the Via Campesino movement and peasant workers movements and people that are living their cooperative ideals and working things out in community. How do we lift up and demonstrate those as more equally, differently valued in our culture and in society as a whole? So I'll stop there. And see if there are any questions emerging, and feel free to either put them in the chat, or if something's just, you want to speak it out, feel free to do that as well. Kevin, maybe if there aren't any questions, if you want to add, but we could also share or the other case study or
Yeah, there's other case studies. I think I wanted to share that this idea of principles in designing next economy organizations is kind of integral to the training. But then we also go to how those principles intersect with some of the nuts and bolts systems. And I don't know that unless people have questions about it, but the systems include everything from how do you do strategic recruiting and orientation and interviewing, selection of people? How do you do that in a way that is in alignment with your values for a more diverse and inclusive enterprise that's focused on personal growth and development? How do you do goal setting or planning in such a way where you can still be flexible and sense and respond and grow an organization without in a very dynamic world and still make choices that are in alignment with your? How do you raise resources, capital if you need it? What are the creative structures and new innovative ways to access resources? How do you make goods accessible to the people who need them when you care for people, labor, and you care for the environment, the forests and fields and farms of the world? How do you, when you care for soil health and climate change, how do you, when you care about those things, how do you make these goods accessible? The paradox of that. How do you do those things? How do you develop new markets? How do you do institutional sales? How do you create an operating projection? Some of the nuts and bolts of like accounting in a way that's intellectually honest and works with your planning. So there's stuff that's like, I think, related to what somebody might think of in an MBA program normally, like business training, but it's all inflected by how do you do that in a way that values life. And tragically, most business 101 education type stuff does not have that same tenor to it. And so that, if business comes with unspoken assumptions of maximizing shareholder value is the best way to go about doing business, there's a whole cascade of ways in which somebody might give you advice or guidance to do business in a normal MBA program that are kind of built or related to that assumption. But if instead you say, business is there, or commerce or transaction or economy is there to help meet everybody's needs with nobody left out, how do we do that? Caring for all life. Well, there's a whole cascade of different ways to go about things. And in the course of the MBA, we share our knowledge about the ways in which one can do that.
So Kevin, we've got some great questions coming up in the chat. We'll take Deanne's question first. She's asking, do we have the opportunity to tackle a real world problem solution project as a part of the program? Yeah.
Go
do
for
you
it.
want to? Okay. I was just going to say that absolutely. One of the things that was so beautiful about the last cohort is that everyone was actually coming in with their own projects that they were already working on. And so certainly there's kind of a couple of different ways to take this. One being, if you already are in the process of starting a business or envisioning a business that you'd like to start, or envisioning a nonprofit, or envisioning a collaborative entity, to bring that and apply so the homework that is traditionally assigned, we call it extra fun. So we actually, we constructed in such a way that after each session, what we go through in terms of, the first initial sessions are around vision and design of your enterprise. And so each of the sessions have an activity that can be applied to the real world entity that you're interfacing in, or the entity that you're dreaming up currently. And so, I don't know if Jake or Monica or Carrie wanted to speak to the extra fun in terms of how that supported your learning, but that's kind of how we've conceived about the project basis of the course so far. Shawn, did you have something to add?
I was just saying, maybe this would be a good time to hear from Jake specifically, because I know Jake did a lot in terms of applying things to his own company, concurrent with the course.
Sure. Hey, yeah, I use the extra fun, the invitations to work on the whatever part of the course we were on, the area of or specialization we were focusing on, to take that time to apply it to think about how I could apply it to my enterprise that I work with in the DC area here. And so, yeah, I just found that like the kind of ongoing learning, the course was often on my mind. I was referring back to all the webinars are sent to you, and we also would have office hours too, where we have time to talk to Lyft team members, and they're all recorded. So I just found myself going back to the resources they shared and the relevant webinars as they came up along the way. So yeah, I mean, I could just really attest to the time between the classes being really effective and helpful. There's like guided learning that you can continue to do.
Jake, do you want to share just briefly what you're creating in the world and what you're bringing forth? I think it might be interesting for people.
Sure. Yeah, I used entered the Lyft MBA to work on my business, which connects communities to nature through gardening, wilderness, and regenerative programs. So we build gardens for communities and go back every week to do programs around wellness and how to grow your own food, as well as teaching people how to forage and identify wild plants. And so we do a variety of services. And I think going into meeting, so I met Shawn and Kevin in 2016. I went to a permaculture convergence and heard them talk, and felt a lot of excitement and relief to learn about Lyft, because, and maybe this is an experience other entrepreneurs here are sharing, or people that are in other enterprises, is that you have an ambition to build in what you love in permaculture or whatever kind of way you want to improve the world. You have an ambition for right livelihood, and maybe feel like overwhelmed creating a business or on your own, things like that kind of feeling. And so meeting Lyft was a really important moment for me. And being part of this webinar, you have these partners around you guiding you to create this. Like I might be know a lot about one area, but there's so many areas involved in creating an enterprise that to have like this team of I guess one thing we talk about is that we're kind of working as midwives to create a new economy, and to feel like you have these people to help you create, and so you don't get stuck and you don't get overwhelmed or lost. Like that's been, I think, the biggest takeaway for me, is I'm trying to do a business that builds permaculture and brings permaculture and nature connection to communities that don't know about that right now, and doing it in an ethical way and an organized way too. So much we see in our like permaculture businesses, they're not, we're not we're not focused enough on the finances or on the organization of the business plan like as we could be. And so having Lyft as a partner to do that's also been really helpful throughout the MBA and beyond for me. So I just want to really encourage people to really consider the MBA course. It's really been great for me.
Thank you so much, Jake. I think we'll turn it over to Kevin to give some insights into Hillary and Fabiana's question. And then I'd like to let Carrie speak as well.
Great, yeah. Very happy to share that in the case studies that we reference in the Next Economy MBA, it's not always as Jake referenced, the midwifery space of organizations that are taking, you could say, the most radical differentiated approach to their system structures and the way in which they're doing business. There's also this very critical part to bringing the Next Economy to life that we call the hospice work. It's working in not in the business as usual economy, but in those organizations that are very close to the business as usual economy, and that they might be larger and providing goods and services in not a regional brand, but maybe a national or international brand. And a couple of examples of case studies that we use there, and Shawn, I see put in the chat, a lot of the B Corps, whereas there's 2,600 or so B Corps in the world, we've had the pleasure of working with a number of them, whether it's companies like Ben & Jerry's or Nativa, we can in the food space. One that Shawn and I have worked with for years is a company called World Centric, and they make a good case study in that they kind of stumbled into this business to then become the market leader in producing compostable serviceware, plates, bowls, cutlery, either using bioplastic starches and or post-consumer waste fibers. And since Shawn and I have been working with them, they've also developed regenerative agriculture, perennial miscanthus-based soil building practices for their fiber base. So their products that they're putting into market, a portion of them are actually carbon negative. They're actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So they've become the market leader for consumer compostable serviceware. And they're in this range of tens of millions of dollars. What they actually hired Lyft to do was that as a company, they set their vision and values, which we helped them go through that process. And in doing so, they created a profit sharing program that the company gets involved in, where the employees allocate, and I won't go into specific percentages, but it's way more of a percent of a profit. There's this thing in the B Corp world of companies that do 1% of profit to like environmental causes. Let's see, World Centric is an order of magnitude and a factor multiplier on top of that in terms of the profit that they generate as a company dedicated to causes and around the world in terms of humanitarian efforts to actually transform people's lives, having a direct impact from a world-centric perspective. So developing that program, allocating their profit, and then changing the way in which they create their products to actually have a beneficial impact on the environment are some of the examples that tie into the principles we discuss and would be used as one of the case studies that we reference. At a different scale, just one up just to show that this next economy is happening, like Shawn said, at different levels of wholeness. There's another company that we've referenced as a case study before. I don't think we did it in this last cohort with the MBA program, but there's in the UK, there's a company called the John Lewis Partnership, which is think of a department store, think of like a competitor to Walmart, has over 60,000 employees. But there's something very interesting about it. The company has somewhat of a hierarchical structure. There's a CEO, general managers, VPs, this kind of thing. But it's actually, the company is owned by an employee-owned trust. So all the employees are part of a trust that is actually the ownership. So think of the CEO of a 60,000 person corporation reporting to the employees. The janitorial service provider at one of the stores sits on the board that the CEO reports to. The entire purpose of the corporation is to serve the employee-owned trust. And because of that, some amazing things happen. People who work at the company, even as a store clerk, will retire as near millionaires. their families all work with their children. So you'll have a grandmother working in the corporation. Her daughter will work there, and her daughter's son will work in the same corporation. Multi-generational. Now, and their value expression of what they do in the world, it's still kind of a department store. It's not like the best thing in the world. So the wholeness, they could maybe be working to do things better. But we share an example of they've got something really dialed in with their structure. Their structure of how they've organized their governance is very, very important. And now the other aspects of their business in terms of their culture and things, there's things that we could talk about, but that we might use as a case study of the importance of structure. Just as 83,000, but dated 60,000 employees. Wow. So they keep growing. So we do case studies at different scales to show that the next economy is happening emergently at different scales all over, and there's different roles to play. Whether, again, you're like, I think Corinne is on the call here. She works at Alter Eco, great B Corp, doing very inspiring things. There's organizations that are doing very important work in making the next economy happening. There's a wholeness to it, and I think, as Monica reflected in her kind of share, the more we have the sense for the wholeness, the more we could work to either shift the organizations we're working for or start new ones that are more complete.
Great. Thank you for those examples. We have many more that we could share. I wanted to share about MicroWorks, but I think I'll pause and really would love to hear Carrie on the line with us, who did take the MBA along with Monica and Jake. Did you want to take a few moments and just share a little bit about your experience, Carrie?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Erin. I came to Lift Economy through permaculture. I discovered permaculture and took Kevin's PDC, then discovered Lift Economy, and then actually started working for a permaculture-oriented landscape company, sort of in that order. And when I started at this company 3 years ago, myself and the owner sat down and really started talking about how we can orient the company around the moral philosophy of benefit of all life. And we really struggled. We really worked really hard and I'd done a lot of research. And when the Next Economy class or cohort was offered through Lift Economy, I couldn't believe it, because I thought, this is the answer to what I've been looking for in one package. And it was, and it is, and it still is. We are changing so many things in our company. We recently have become a benefit corporation in California. We're working towards B Corp certification, which is another structure that we can use, and a tool that we can use as a company to align ourselves with what we believe is the philosophy that we should all be moving towards. And it's just been amazing. Again, having a set of experts in this area as mentors through the course and after is really incredibly important for our company. And yeah, I want to keep this short and stop, so in case anyone else has any questions, but I just cannot recommend this course enough. And thank you all, Lift team.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I also just want to share that in terms of the word expert, we developed a little bit of some level of expertise, and what we're really hopeful for the MBA, and we see it already in our MBA participants, Jake going out and passing it on, sharing this knowledge, teaching it. What our mission and goal really with this is to develop more expertise out in the world, so that we can really transition this economy together. So I just want to express my gratitude to Monica and Jake and Carrie, who are actually on the ground implementing this in their own enterprises and really doing the work of it. So thank you. And thank you all of you for just sharing your time, everyone on this webinar that's participating and listening to these stories and paying attention. I do want to be conscious of time, and I know I can stay on for a few more minutes after the hour, but One question that has been coming up a lot is, so how do I get involved? You know, what can I do to sign up? And so we have extended our early bird pricing to the end of the day Saturday. So feel free to take advantage of that. I wanted to call out that we have gotten some questions around, you know, what's your policy around, you know, satisfaction, or how do I give feedback on the course? And we want to say that, you know, we do have a values-based policy around making sure that the value that we profess to provide is actually received by you. So one of the things that's kind of like 100% satisfaction guarantee, it's at the end of the course, if you've gone through the course, participated, that if you don't feel you receive the value, that you sit down and have a conversation with us around what could be improved or why, and we're happy to create a different form of reciprocity, even if it is refunding the entirety of your course fee to you. And we hold that value as a really critical piece of the next economy, getting clear feedback loops and developing those feedback loops so that we're constantly iterating and in the process of learning ourselves. We're very cognizant of and trying to be increasingly cognizant of our blind spots as we create this inclusive and just new economy, next economy together. And yeah, I guess, do the partners have anything to add, or are there any other questions that are coming up from the participants of the webinar around that, what I just shared, and how to sign up?
I'll just briefly, if you haven't had a chance to look at the website about the training, it's a nine-month kind of duration, 18 sessions kind of like this, where we have group discussion and exploration of topics. There's a lot of information density to it, but there's also an office hour, which is much more informal, no prepared presentations, all Q&A. So 18 sessions, 18 office hours. We are open to, and then there's the local cohorts where there's enough critical mass or where it makes sense to break out into small groups. We're very open to iterating on what we tried the first time and having more types of breakout sessions and more on-life experiences where possible. There's also the extra fun. So there's a lot of materials with each of the 18 sessions that could be done on a self-paced. All the sessions are recorded. There's a Google group listserv that is used for communication to share resources and learning with each other. Have I missed any other logistic stuff?
Just that we are trying to make it as accessible as possible. So for those self-identified as person of color, we do have a 50% reduction in the cost to attend. And please share that to the extent possible with your networks, folks that might be interested in taking that opportunity. Do we have some case study outside of the US? Yeah, and you're from Brazil. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, the one in the UK that Kevin mentioned, in the global, oh, thank you, Hillary. Do any of the other partners want to speak to that around other parts of the world? Case studies?
Yeah, I mean, there are some, but again, scale is one of the things. Like at the large scale, like Natura, the B Corp Brazil, yeah, comes to mind as something that I have a cursory understanding of some of the things that I'm impressed by them. I'm waiting for somebody who knows them better to pop my bubble, because I'm very impressed with what they're doing, but I don't know if it's real. So I need to talk to somebody who knows, and maybe on our team, Ryan or Shawn might interact with them more. Like Shawn, there's also the smaller organizations. There's a social enterprise, which is also a B Corp, called XRunner, that's actually developed a way to monetize the collection and processing of compost toilet yields into fertility. which is a very interesting social enterprise that we're tracking, much smaller in scale than something like Natura. And they're working in, I believe, Peru. One of our investees in the Force for Good Fund has a model for doing decentralized, small-scale commercial solar photovoltaic deployments and financing, a very novel model of financing in Haiti, which is, as a case study, something that their model is meant to replicate in quote-unquote emerging markets. We would describe them as markets that have been oppressed, suffered from socioeconomic oppression. But these emerging markets are places where there are certain types of business models that we can reference as case studies.
There's a number of FiberShed affiliates in other parts of the world as well, and FiberShed is a case study that we could spend a whole day, weeks talking about, but that's one that we often reference. FiberShed is this idea that we can create a textile economy using the fibers and dyes and labor sourced from within our watershed, if you will. And so I'll put one link in there for a FiberShed that has been, for centuries existing in Mexico, and it's just now really looking at how they can share this Zapotec weaver ethos and aesthetic with the world, and really make sure that those values are honored, that they're stemming from indigenous peoples. Now that larger companies aren't paying attention to natural dyes or bioregional textiles, making sure to honor many of the origins of those ideas.
I would just underline, Erin put in the working world, really successful model coming out of the financial collapse in Argentina. They provided capital financing for some of the over 100 factories that were reclaimed and now operating by the worker owners. So that's a really lovely case study. And then since they've had that success in Argentina, they've come to the United States, and we're actually in a peer funding network with them, which is another really cool, innovative case study of sorts, where our fund is federated with their fund and a total of 22 peer networks around the country to deliver capital to local small cooperative enterprises. So that's kind of an international success that has come to the U.S. as well.
And we, as clients, we have worked with some companies outside of the States through our partners, the Ecological Landscape Mastery Program. I have been consulting with one of the founders of something called the Green School in Bali, in Indonesia, and working with them as one of our clients and learning about their model there, just as another example.
Andrew works with a company in Canada, Anemiki. Andrew, do you want to say anything about them?
Yeah, absolutely. Anemiki is an Indigenous-owned digital services enterprise. They employ a number of really interesting strategies, from the structure of their business to the culture to the services that they offer. For example, they integrate what are traditionally sort of pan-Indigenous principles called the 7 grandfather teachings is one name of them, and and that is in various ways integrated through cultural practices within the organization, meaning organizational culture, but also with their work with their clients, and are consistently pushing the edges around reframing Indigenous people as, rightfully so, framing Indigenous people as technologists, rather, and kind of overcoming stereotypes. And they've also been highly involved in like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada. So lots to share about what they're doing, but they're a very cool Indigenous owned organization in Canada.
And we have others to share too. It's coming to mind too that one of our participants in last the last cohort is working in Mexico to create a crowd-funded investment platform to raise investment from smaller investment in Mexico. And and in Brazil, we'd love to chat on offline too around if anybody has questions explicitly around whether this is a fit for them as individuals, feel free to reach out to us as well. My email, I'll put it in the chat. I'm happy to take a call, one-on-one call, and talk about your enterprise and what you're working on and whether this may be a fit or just your ideas. So thank you so much for joining us. If there are no other questions, maybe just to honor your time as well, we'll bring our conversation to a close. But really appreciate you all for taking the time today to learn a little bit about this, and hopefully it's been useful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.